All right, so please just state your name.
My name's Nicole.
All right, and Nicole will be taking on the role of Line of 5 today. So you've been here about 10 years?
10 years?
Yeah, and you're the duty team leader.
Yes.
What year did you leave school?
Grade 10.
10. Not many computer skills, but
I got myself a tablet recently.
very good. So yeah, that'll
Try to
help a
learn.
bit. And you broke your arm last year.
I did.
Yeah. Says here you can't do many practical tasks much more than about 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, luckily today, this is all a presentation mainly about following emergency procedures. Um, Once you go through all of these, you can just start the slideshow by clicking on the mouse as you go through. So obviously we're not in the workplace, the toilets, just up the end. Emergency exits behind me. Out there. Assembly point is actually a park at the back. We'll sort that out. And yeah, ground rules, just keep you cool. Try not to lose it with me and we'll get through it. All right, next one, we'll get started. So, what we're trying to accomplish today, we're recognizing emergency signage, the main practice being emergency procedures, what you personally can do in an emergency, the plans that are put up and designed to follow, for everyone's interest. And we'll finish up with an activity, maybe just some role play to, sort of put in practice what we learned here today. So, get the next one. So, emergency signage. Have you ever been in an emergency situation yourself?
No.
No. So, if you imagine something such as a fire, do you have an idea of what you're likely to do in that sort of instance?
I'd gather my staff and go to the assembly point if the fire alarm had been triggered.
Yep.
Call the fire brigade.
Yep. So a lot of the signage that we're looking for, you can see here, main exits, right? The fire alarms, first aid stations, the floor planning, assembly point, and fire extinguisher. You've have you seen them around the place
Yeah.
much at all? Yeah. Would you be able to tell me where they were off the top of your head?
I've seen that one before.
The fire alarms? Yep. So those fire alarm signs come in various forms. They're not the same everywhere, but it's got the same message essentially. So you can see the fire, the button, the hand, all the rest of it. So all these signs, they're designed to be pretty basic and send the same message, you know, without needing to necessarily read as much. First aid stations at work. Could you tell me where it was? Do you know where it is?
Got a first aid kit in the tea room.
In the tea room. Nice. Yeah. And the floor plans, have you seen any floor plans around the place that
Yes. So I work in a cafe in the mall. So the mall has a lot of these up around.
so around the workplace itself, you might find one, close to the entrance or in the tea room, as you mentioned. There's usually, or there should be two or three around the place that are quite clear. Um, Emergency assembly points. Now, your cafe being on the street, generally, if there's an open area outside, the most convenient and safest emergency assembly point would be, somewhere across the street, somewhere in an open park, somewhere, maybe a car park,
Yeah.
something like that. And yeah, generally in an emergency, if you see that signage, that essentially says that that's where like all of your employees are required to gather. Can you tell me why you might have an emergency assembly point?
To make sure that everyone's there and you haven't forgotten someone and someone's not left trapped in the building.
Yeah, that's right. Cool. And obviously fire extinguishers. Unless you've got any questions, we can keep going.
Uh,
Yep. So throughout this presentation, just to make things a bit easier, there's going to be a couple of videos in which, it just makes things easier to get the point across and, a little bit interactive. So when you're ready, you can hit play.
um,
Yep.
Hungry Jack's Ice Drinks. Rich, velvety smooth barista coffee over ice. Now at Hungry Jack's.
Welcome to our
Turn it
emergency
up a bit.
evacuation video. The best way to prepare for any future emergency is by taking the time to carefully read and understand the emergency procedures and evacuation plan for your area. Also be sure you know the route and location of all the available emergency assembly points. The emergency assembly points are usually signposted. Emergency exits are indicated by signs. There may be one or more exit doors in your area. Always choose the safest route. We must also be aware of the firefighting and first aid equipment in your work area. Fire extinguishers and hose reels must be free from obstructions at all times. The areas adjacent to first aid equipment must be free from obstructions at all times. All emergency exits and pathways must be clear of all obstructions at all times. If you ever discover a fire or smoke, warn everyone. Activate fire alarms or call emergency services on 911. If you have been trained and it is within your ability, use firefighting equipment to control the fire. Most importantly, maintain a clear escape route at all times. If you cannot control the fire, evacuate the building. If it's safe to do so, confine the spread of smoke and fire by closing all doors. If in a smoke-filled area, stay low. You must take the most direct and safest route to exit the building. In an emergency, do not collect your belongings before exiting. Remain calm. Do not run or use the lifts. Once outside, do not re-enter the building. Stay at the emergency assembly area, unless otherwise instructed or given the all clear to re-enter the building. Be sure to see your supervisor if you have any questions or concerns.
We'll just click on the next one to get out of that.
how would you know?
Yep, just over there, somewhere on the open space. There we go. We'll just leave it there, give it a minute. So you already touched on, the assembly points and, the reasons why you would meet up there, but were there any other points or things in that video that, you've got questions about or that struck your attention?
Never used fire extinguisher.
Never used a fire extinguisher.
I imagine they hopefully have instructions on them.
Well, most of them do. Yeah, they're pretty straightforward. But in that instance, there are people such as fire wardens. We'll go through that in a minute. But yeah, fire wardens that sort of take on that role of meeting at the assembly point, marking off names, taking on that responsibility of finding out who's there and making sure nobody's left behind.
Right,
But
so the fire warden would also go to the assembly point and do a roll call.
yeah, generally there's multiple fire wardens. One will do a roll call, but at the end of the day, it's if you can help with the fire and extinguish it somewhat, then that's good. But that, in my opinion, that wouldn't be your main priority. Your main priority, in my opinion, would be to sound the alarm, right? Grab your essentials, maybe your keys and your
What
phone.
about the cash registers?
No,
In a way,
no, none of that. You leave everything behind. The only thing I would suggest you grab, if they're in arm's length, are your keys and your phone. So, in the event of an emergency, if there's not some sort of emergency phone around, at least you do have your mobile. Everyone's always got their mobile handy. It's either on the desk, in the hand, you know. So, keys, phone. If you can, if there's anybody around, notify everyone,
Mm.
but get out of the building. Go
so
to the
my
nearest
my
exit.
responsibility would be, of course, getting my staff to the assembly point. But I feel that the customers, the patrons, would also fall under my.
Well, that's right. So if you're front of house, your main priority before even grabbing your stuff is to notify the customers, get them to the safest place, notify everyone, and get them out. But that does not fall on your responsibility. That comes down to the fire warden. You do everything you can to help, but there is no point sticking around, acting a hero, and trying to get everyone out of there. Notify everyone, get there calmly, and escort everyone out. So, yeah, a few points here that we may have just touched on. Number one, and probably the most important, is to stay calm. Right? Nobody wants any sort of panic. You know, your panic rubs off on other people. So if you start freaking out, it's just a chain reaction. Everyone's going to start freaking out. So yeah, stay calm. Call 000. So that was one of the things that I touched on, is that with personal belongings, your computer, your cash register, you know, last week's pay slips, leave all that behind. Number one, grab your phone, call 000 as soon as you can, or as soon as it's safe to do so. Proceed to the nearest exit. If you are in a building that, you know, a cafe that is perhaps in an airport, you know, on the second floor or whatever, it's always important not to take the lifts. That's definitely a no-no. In an emergency situation, it's very important that you take the stairs, minimizing any chance of malfunction or getting stuck or whatever else. As we just touched on, informing other staff. You know, the more staff that are aware, obviously the safer it's going to be, and the quicker the message is going to get out to patrons and other staff and so on. It comes under sort of sounding the alarm, but that sounding the alarm, as you mentioned on the image, that you've never seen one like that. Generally, there is some sort of alarm within each workplace that gets triggered.
Yeah, it's probably we probably have one. I just haven't noticed it.
Yeah, so that comes back to the building mapping, the emergency plans. And yeah, so that comes down to the emergency plans, leaving your belongings behind and proceeding to the meeting point, which we also touched on. And just following over to the next one. So we've got another video. This one's based purely on what you can do as an individual and not any sort of responsibility role, or rather what your responsibility are as an employee and not a fire warden. So if you just want to hit play. And
Hungry Jack's Ice Drinks. Rich, velvety smooth barista coffee over ice. Now at Hungry Jack's.
Ensuring a safe and efficient workplace evacuation during emergencies is crucial to protecting lives and minimizing risks. Here are the top 5 essential tips for workplace emergency evacuations. 1. Know the emergency plan. Every employee should be familiar with the company's emergency evacuation plan. This includes understanding escape routes, designated assembly points, and the location of emergency exits. Regular training sessions and evacuation drills help reinforce this knowledge and ensure everyone knows their role during an emergency. 2. Stay calm and follow instructions. Panic can exacerbate dangerous situations. It is essential to remain calm, listen to instructions from designated staff or emergency personnel, and avoid rushing or pushing. Clear communication and cooperation are vital for an orderly evacuation. 3. Use designated escape routes. Always use the evacuation routes specified in the emergency plan. Avoid elevators unless explicitly instructed by emergency personnel, as they may become inoperable or unsafe during specific emergencies like fires. 4. Assist others when possible. Help colleagues who may require assistance, such as individuals with mobility issues. However, do not put yourself in danger while assisting others. Report any individuals who may be trapped or need help to emergency responders. 5. Do not re-enter the building until cleared. Once you have evacuated and reached the designated assembly point, do not return to the building until authorities or safety personnel have given the all-clear signal. Re-entering prematurely can put lives at risk. Conclusion. Regular training, clear communication, and calm behavior are key factors in ensuring workplace evacuations are carried out smoothly and effectively. Preparedness saves lives. Stay informed, stay calm, and stay safe. Please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next safety video.
Click through that one. Hold it up there. There you go. Just hold it up there. So, what key messages would you have pulled out of that video just then?
So stay calm. That's one of the first things they said. Don't use the lifts. Use the stairs. Getting everyone to the emergency evacuation points, and don't go in until I guess the fires tell you can.
Yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it. But some of the things that they did touch on were, regular fire drills. Do they hold since you've been there? I mean, you've been there 10 years,
Yeah.
but you've many fire drills since you started?
Yeah, there's usually at least one every 6 months.
One every 6 months, yeah. Okay, good. So, another thing that they touched on, you would have seen in the videos, the alarms that we were talking about before, which I did point out. The alarms, as you saw generally next to the emergency doors, you piece together all the signage, generally, if you know the floor plan, you know where the exits are, those alarms, those fire extinguishers, everything you need there is generally going to be near those exits. One of the important things with those exits sometimes goes unnoticed, but should be noted to always keep them clear. So it doesn't matter what you've got to store. One of those things that you can do is to make sure and mention that those fire exits are continuously clear and everyone knows they're on. So, moving on to our next point. Okay, so staying aware. Being aware of these situations in an emergency, as I just touched on, comes down to noticing fire exits being clear, making sure that first aid kits are up to date, knowing that you do, regular fire drills, and if there's anything that's concerning you taking it up with management, or, if you see anything that could pose a hazard, then make sure that, you report that. Knowing your emergency plan. So coming back to, the fire drills and all of that, every 6 months, that's pretty good in most workplaces. But the emergency plan is simple enough said, but that comes down to the floor plan, because in the event of a fire, there's going to be smoke everywhere. You're gonna want to be able to notice key factors within that, key points, sorry, or key icons in that building that can direct you to the nearest exit and the safest place. Practicing emergency procedures, maintain a safe workplace. Again, that just touches and keeps highlighting just how important having those emergency doors is, and the fire extinguishers as well, keeping them up to date, getting them checked. Again, I'm glad you're picking up on staying calm, because anyone freaking out, that could, it generally causes more havoc. Using the fire exits and emergency role awareness. So those are fire wardens. When you do go through those emergency procedures, knowing who is your fire warden, who is your first aid officer, knowing everyone's role in that scenario, you know who to look for and who to report to. That would just continue on. Any questions? No? All right. Yep. Keep going. Emergency plans. Now, with your emergency plans, there's obviously a little bit more that goes into it than just the mapping of the building and knowing where they are. So, when you think of an emergency plan, what would immediately come to mind? If you were in an emergency and you had a checklist, what sort of things would be on it?
I guess, is this the actual emergent, like there is an emergency now, so we've got to activate the plan, or is this the checklist before an emergency happens?
Let's go both.
So before it happens would be checking equipment, checking first aid kits, checking, I guess you mentioned signage, so checking the signage is all there.
Yep.
Evacuation routes are acceptable.
Yep.
Checking everything's clear. The equipment is clear of obstruction.
Yep.
And then during an emergency, the checklist might be making sure everyone's safe, calling 000,
Yep.
and getting everyone to the emergency evacuation point.
Yeah, perfect. So, yeah, emergency equipment, you're exactly right. The emergency equipment, some equipment that you may not think of, you've got first aid kits, fire extinguishers, alarms, all of that. But if you're a part of let's say the emergency team, you're a fire warden or a first aid officer, the equipment you may need could be a megaphone, it could be hard hats, safety vests, there's so many things that, for example, a sat phone, for whatever reason, just the equipment that a lot of the time most people don't think of, maintaining that equipment, and making sure that all of those are up to date, getting your fire extinguishers checked on a annual basis, making sure that phones and whatnot are up to date, your sprinklers are maintained, knowing individual roles, we just touched on that, as a general employee, if you're not on the emergency committee or whatever the case may be, then your main role is to alert people and get you out. So if you're not taking on that role or any sort of responsibility, then your responsibility is to yourself and to get yourself out. Any qualifications, if you are on the emergency committee or the OHS committee, whatever it is, maintaining qualifications is pretty important, because if you're a first aid officer and your qualifications or your certificate are not in date, that can lead to severe legal issues. So yeah, any sort of emergency qualification that you've got is paramount to keeping up to date. Emergency devices, phones, megaphones, contingency plans. Now, if for whatever reason you couldn't make it to an assembly point, has there ever been any sort of talk of a contingency plan? By contingency plan, I mean like a plan B.
I believe there is a second assembly point.
Yeah.
At the other side of the building.
Other side of the building. Yeah, that's good. So, updated contact list. Now, aside from finding out who's on shift, is there, what benefits would there be to an updated contact list?
If you're missing someone, you can actually call them to see if they're okay.
Yeah.
To see if they're in the building, if they've made it out to the secondary emergency.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, updating contact lists isn't just people. It's, people change their emails, phone numbers, socials, everything all the time. So making sure that updated contact lists, are on point is also important. And maintaining readiness is, as I said, just being aware, making sure that everyone knows their role. It's basically just everything that we just spoke about. So maintaining readiness is keeping that emergency situation in the back of your mind and being aware of what could go wrong. And just go through the next one. All right, so we do have a little activity real quick. Obviously, there's not much room to work with around here, but if you were to take a look around, are there certain things, in the case of an emergency, what would you do right here if I were to say emergency? What, after everything we learned, what would you proceed to do?
Okay, so if I had my phone and keys in front of me, I'd grab them.
Mm-hmm.
I'd alert the staff members.
Mm-hmm.
And if not the fire warden, so I would just alert whoever I was coming into contact with on my way out to the emergency exit. I can see the fire extinguishers there, so it looks like an emergency exit.
Yeah. Okay, so do you just want to pop up, hypothetically, you're out back, everyone out there is front of office, and just quickly walk through, say, front of house, the fire's over there, you notify everyone, you jump up, notify everyone out front, and head to the nearest exit. So maybe just, pop up, we'll see it on camera, and maybe grab the extinguisher and head out.
Got my keys, say, there's fire.
Fire.
Yep. And then I'm calling 000 on my way out, I guess.
Yeah.
Then head to the door and out to the emergency evacuation point.
That's good. But my situation would be phone. Okay. So there's fire, everyone out, nearest exit. And then I head over here. If I see the fire, I'm aware of the fire extinguisher, right? Usually signage on the side. If you can attend to the fire, then sure. But if not, worst case, leave it behind, gather anyone you can, and head straight to the nearest exit. Out the back door, and then straight to the nearest meeting point. Okay? Any questions?
No.
All right, just take a seat. So, no other questions?
No.
All right, so just quickly, what's do you think you learned anything from the presentation? Like, if you were to take away anything from this presentation, what would it be?
We need to do some decluttering in the workplace.
Yeah,
That's one of the big things that I've taken away to stay calm in emergency situation.
yeah.
Yeah, those are the two biggest things I think I've taken away.
All right, good. Well, it's good to know that this presentation can get the message across. It may seem very repetitive, but I think it's important to drill that message across because it's not something that people really think about day to day. So it's important to have that message drilled into you and in the back of your mind so that if there is ever an emergency, that awareness kicks in and you can just go into an automated state of action. So all right, I think we'll leave it there and yeah, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
All right, just stop.